The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road is gone, and I must follow if I can. J.R.R. Tolkien in The Fellowship of the Ring. Those that are familiar with The Lord of the Rings and its prequel, The Hobbit, will recognize this poem as Bilbo's understanding of his adventures. The road that he speaks of is like a stream that comes from his doorway and goes off into the distance, and where it ends he doesn't know. I think that this same metaphor can be applied to the ultimate adventure, that is, the search for truth. In a book of ancient wisdom it says, "How much better it is to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding is to be chosen above silver." We've all met people in our lives that have been overeducated. They learned a lot of facts, but somehow those facts hadn't translated into improving their lives. It is doubtful that this understanding is what is referred to by Solomon in the previous passage. The study of truth and how it's known is called epistemology. Modern studies of truth often bog down in one or two directions. The first is, we'll eventually understand and know everything through the scientific method. The second is, we can't really know anything. It's interesting that Christian epistemology contains an element that is not held within non-Christian studies. That is, that obedience in response to revelation or the acquisition of facts is necessary for enlightenment, and that a person will return to ignorance if they do not apply what they've learned. The secular presupposition that we can know without submitting is to be rejected. Consider the doubt of Thomas and the unbelief of Pilate. Thomas is given more information by the risen Christ when he doubts that Christ has come back from the dead. On the other hand, Pilate, in dialogue with Jesus, comes to a point in the conversation where Jesus refused to talk to him anymore, and he's met just with silence. What's the difference between these two men? I think that Thomas had legitimate doubts. Dead people normally don't come back from wherever they are. On the other hand, I think that Pilate did not want to be conformed to the facts that he knew were true. And therefore, Jesus was not willing to give him more information because he was unwilling to operate on the information he already had. The Apostle Paul is even more graphic when he states that some claim to be wise but became fools. You probably heard the adage, you can't get there from here. Well, the reality is, if you can get there, you can get there from here. It just might be difficult. Jesus tells the Jewish scholar and leader Nicodemus, "Men love darkness rather than light, for their deeds were evil." In other words, ignorance is not only from the lack of facts, but from lack of willingness to conform our behavior to the facts. As Bilbo rightly points out, the road begins at a door, the door to your home. That's how you deal with truth. You learn something where you're at, and then you're faced with a question. Do you follow it, or do you ignore it? The reality is that when you become aware of a new piece of information, you're faced with the question of whether you're going to conform to it, attack it, or hide from it. Those are really your only three choices. Jesus Christ confronts us with the knowledge of himself in his gospel. He says, "Come and follow." We have to make the decision to obey, to attack, or to hide. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Our lives are illuminated by truth. When that light shines, we either embrace it and modify ourselves based on what we learn from it, or we attack it and try to put the light out, or we hide from it. The story of the talents, one of the many parables that Jesus shared about, talks about a servant who's given a great deal of money and he's told to use it. He refuses to use it, and because of his refusal to use what he was given, even what he had was taken away from him and given to somebody who was willing to operate on it. If you apply that to truth, if I know something and I respond to it, I'll learn more things. If I know something and I refuse to conform myself to it, even what I have will be taken away. I'll lose that knowledge or understanding or insight. I would encourage you not to be like the servant, but rather to be like Bilbo, who in the poem says, I must follow if I can. The Christian perspective would say to Bilbo, you can, if you will.